So now let's look at the symmetry requirements for the spoke design. And I've created a spoke curve here. And the first thing we need to do is see the mirrored version over on this side. And we can normally do this using layer symmetry. But the default symmetry direction is across the y-axis, across the center of the car. So if I turn the symmetry on the layer, I just get two curves in the same place because it's mirrored across the center line this way. So I can select the layer and say Layers, Symmetry, Set Plane, and instead choose that plane as the symmetry direction. And if I set it, then I can see the mirrored version on the other side. But I'll also need to be able to work symmetrically across here, because my hole will cross this line, and I need to make sure I have a smooth tangent cutout. So for that, I'll use a construction plane. And I could use the geometry mode and snap it to the edge of the geometry I've already got. But I'm going to use a world plane and just grid snap it to the origin to start with. And then I get the manipulator that's similar to the symmetry plane one. But this time I want to get a different angle, so I can click on this dotted arc and type in 36 degrees. And that's now in line with that edge. So this will be my new Z direction and this one my X direction. I'm just going to go into the foreviews before I set the construction plane. And you don't need to do this, it just helps me to show you what's going on. And now, when I hit set for the construction plane, then in the perspective view the grid is picked up and moved to be in line with the construction plane. But more usefully, in the 2D windows, the view is now reorientated to center the geometry on this 36-degree axis. So I can use the Toggle Construction Plane tool to quickly switch between my original orientation, and you can see here that it says just X and Z. And then if I toggle it again, it goes into my construction plane orientation and displays that here in the corner. So for my curve, I could mirror that, and mirroring now respects the construction plane axes as opposed to the world axes. So I can now see how that's working as a symmetrical shape. And in particular, I want to make sure that the tangency is correct across the center line. So I can use snapping now because the vertical mouse constraint also respects the construction plane direction. So I'll toggle that back to the world axes. And in the first concept design workflow, we looked at how you can use the duplicate object tool to design your layout of spokes or holes. So I'll pick the curve and then use Edit Duplicate Object. And I want 5 spokes in total, so I'm going to create 4 new ones. And I'll rotate in the Y direction by 72 degrees. And I'll use this instance option. And I made a mistake there because my pivot point needs to be at the center of rotation, so I'll just set it at the grid origin. And then I'll do the duplicate object again, and it'll have kept the settings. So now I can see how the layout is working. If I want to refine my design, then I can move the CVs on the first curve and all the instances update. And I'm just going to put the rim to 360 degrees to make it easier to see how the spokes sit in the rim. So the instances provide a way of designing the spoke shape, but once we're ready to build, then I'll delete them because they aren't independent curves. So when I do a pick curve on one, I get them all. So I need to do pick object and then just select them and delete the instances. So if I'm happy with my design, then I can project the curve onto the surfaces. And I'm just going to work on the front surfaces to start with, so I'll turn the rear ones off. And I'll make sure I'm going in the Y direction and project those on. And then I can just trim it to leave the spoke. Now for the sidewalls, because I'm building for production or prototyping, then I should incorporate a draft angle. So I'll use the MS Draft tool. And I'll just get these back to simple numbers. And I want to draft in the Y direction. And chain select is on, so I can just pick that row of edges there and build. And then I'll work out which direction I want the draft in. So I'll do a -5, which should be plenty for a wheel. Now I've got quite heavy surfaces here because of building from a trimmed edge, but this is my first design iteration, so I'll live with that for now. And I'll tidy up my surfaces onto a layer, and then all that's left to do is intersect with the rear surfaces and the rim. So in the next section we'll look at finishing that off with some G2 curvature fillets.